Hi, I'm Dave Anderson. Welcome to the Sales DVD. The secret to your success lies in your daily routine. I first heard that quote from my friend John Maxwell. In fact, I have the whole quote in your notes, which I want to get right to. Under the opening thoughts, take a look at John's full quote here. Author and speaker John Maxwell said, "The secret to your success lies in your daily routine." He said, I could watch your routine for a while, you could watch mine for a while, and we'd be able to predict each other's future. Because the little things we do every day, good or bad, do eventually show up. It's all about sowing and reaping. Continue with me here. As important as the final week of the month is to a salesperson's success, and usually those are pretty good daily routines that last week of the month. We're in motion, we're focused the whole bit. But that's not enough. Look what it says. It's often the days in between those final weeks that determine whether a month will be a poor, a good, or a great one. It's not just the last 5 days. Those are kind of a given. What are you doing in the days in between those last 5 days? That's really where you can hit the big time in sales. Following are points to consider as you evaluate your own daily routine and look for ways to improve it. In fact, just kind of look in the mirror at your daily routine and let's look at what your average day looks like. Again, let's not think about maybe the weekend days if those are extremely busy or the last few days of the month, because those really do pick up steam and are, as I said, kind of a given that they're going to be very active and sometimes frantic. But let's look at your average Monday, your average Tuesday, the 3rd of the month, the 5th of the month, the 8th of the month. I really believe that these are the days that can really put you into the big time in sales if you will fine-tune, highly structure, and discipline your daily routine. So I want to go over a couple of opening thoughts on the daily routine and then give you some specific aspects of your routine to examine and improve. That being said, let's get to point one. Point one. You've heard me say this before. It bears repeating here. Success is not an accident. It always raises my eyebrows sometimes when I hear somebody that's not successful tell a successful person, boy, you get all the breaks. You just had things just kind of fall into place and just kind of go your way. And the guy's been successful for 10 years, and this unsuccessful person's crediting it to breaks. Now, anybody can get a good break, anybody can suffer a bad break, but over time, success nor failure are accidents. We set ourselves up for them or we don't. And where does this have to do with our program today? It comes down to the daily routine. The things we're doing or not doing on that day in, day out basis. Jim Rohn said it really well. I put the quote in your notes. He said, success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every day. Now, I would just underline the everyday part there if I were you, because this is what separates the people who do okay in sales and those who really hit the big time. It's the consistency of right actions that compound success. Those right decisions done repeatedly that compound success. And so again, it's not just the last few days. It's not just your busy days. It's your Tuesday, your Wednesday, your 3rd of the month, your 8th of the month. Those sometimes mundane days that have huge potential if we'll get our act together and employ some of the things I'm talking about here. Take a look at letter A. And this, really be honest with yourself here. Letter A, how much would a training film of your daily routine be worth? I mean, if somebody filmed you on one of these average days I'm talking about improving here, you know, that average, maybe it's a Tuesday, it's a 3rd or 4th of the month, and they were filming you. And how marketable would that be? How much would somebody be willing to pay for it? Maybe somebody just getting into sales or someone who has even been in it a long time but wants to get to the next level. What could they learn by watching a game film of your daily routine? I mean, what would they hear you saying to customers? Would that be worth much to them? What would they see you doing with your downtime? I mean, could they learn from that? What would the quality of your conversations be with the people you work with? Would you be talking about positive, uplifting things or gossip and kind of, diminishing type of conversations? I mean, what would it be worth? How disciplined would you be? What would your attitude look like? How much motion would you be in during the day? Would you be active? Would you be passive? Would you be focused? Would you be scattered? Really, I don't know what your game film would look like, but my guess is, if you're like most folks, it could use some improvement. It could use some tweaking. Think about it as you go through the day. Man, if somebody were filming me right now, what would this be worth? Would this get me Fired if the right people saw it? Or would it get me hired someplace else, to a higher position if the right people were really paying attention and watching it? I mean, what would it be worth? In fact, take a look what it says. How much has it been paying you? If you want an idea of what it's worth, what's it been paying you? Some of you are making a good living. My guess is your game film would be worth quite a bit. Now, it can still be improved. Those of you who aren't doing so well, how much has it been paying you? That kind of tells you what it's worth. No. If you're doing it, maybe you're new and you're doing a lot of the right things, or you believe you are, and they just haven't shown up yet, continue to do those things. It will eventually show up. But if you're doing a lot of the wrong things, that kind of brings us to the next point. In fact, even if you're not doing a lot of them that are wrong, if you're doing them every once in a while, and they're key things, they're going to hurt you. And that brings us to point 2. Point 2, failure is not an accident. Okay, so success isn't an accident, but either is failure. Okay, you don't accidentally fail. Again, just like with success, you can have a bad break, you can have a good break, you can have something that goes wrong, something that goes against you, something that's not your fault, something you didn't see coming. But over a period of time, if you continue to fail, that is not an accident. You either set yourself up for it or you don't. And take a look at what Jim Rohn says. Failure is nothing more than a few errors in judgment repeated every what? Every day. What was the quote under the first one? Look, go back to number 1, please. Look at success. Success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced when? Every day. We're talking again about the daily routine, that average day. And sometimes it's not even something we do that causes us to fail. It's what we neglect to do. It's the seed we fail to plant, the call we fail to make. Sometimes it's not that we go out and do stupid, foolish, low return things. It's just we do nothing. We're too passive on the average day. We're not making something happen. We're waiting for something to start. We're waiting for energy to come from the outside in rather than creating it from the inside out, because our disciplined daily routine lacks discipline. There is no discipline. There is no structure. Our daily routine is a free-for-all. We make it up as we go along, shooting from the hip, operating out of instinct, and then wondering, why did I have another so-so type of month? Never let anybody convince you differently. Success nor failure are accidents. We're setting ourselves up for them either way. Where? When? During your daily routine. I'm going to drill that. I only have so much time to spend with you today, but I'm going to hit that over and over again. Every day matters. Every day matters. Every hour matters. Every moment matters. That's not cliche. It's true. And if you look at what it says here with letter A, I think that this is going to hit home for some people. Hopefully not for too many in the room, but if this isn't someone in the room, you probably know somebody like this. Take a look at it. Letter A. Failures become failures long before anyone realizes they're a failure. Their accumulation of poor decisions eventually catches up with them. Well, when do those poor decisions happen? During their daily routine. I really do believe that failures become failures long before it shows up, long before someone points to them and says, oh, that person failed. No, it happens a little bit at a time, one failed discipline here, one bad decision there, one bit of neglect over there, a little sloppiness in the daily routine here, a little laziness in the daily routine there. It does add up. I don't know whether you fall into the first or second category right now, point 1 or point 2. I don't know if you would be considered as a success in sales or a great success or a failure or somewhere in between, but I promise you, wherever you're at has an awful lot to do with what you're doing on those average days, those daily routines, those sometimes mundane Mondays. We're tiptoeing through the Tuesdays and the Wednesdays and the Thursdays, waiting for the busy days to get here, waiting for the weekends to get here, and that will kill you in sales. So I want to talk about how to do better. All right, we understand now, I believe, the importance of our daily routine. It's going to determine whether we're successful or whether we're failing. Neither of those is an accident. So let's talk about how to make sure we're doing the right things. And I think number 3 gives us a big head start in that direction. Let's talk about it. Point 3. Point 3, highly structure your days. Highly structure your days. I'm a big believer in structure. I'm a structured person by nature. I've developed some very effective structures for different parts of my life over the decades. So I'm speaking, I believe, with some credibility here. I know and I have seen what structure has been able to do for me, and I know what it can do for you. Look what it says. Structure creates activity, energy, and momentum from the inside out rather than waiting for something to happen on the outside that creates movement on the inside. Does that make sense? Think about it. You know, normally what we do or what we see in sales is a lot of passivity. We see people who are waiting for something to happen from the outside in. We're waiting for those last 5 days of the month. We're waiting for a new incentive program. We're waiting for a new advertising program to start or a new ad to come out. We're waiting for a new influx of inventory, whatever. And we're waiting for better economic news. You get the idea. And we're sitting here waiting for something from the outside to happen to create energy on the inside, to drive the traffic and so forth. But what I have found about structure is it drives energy from the inside out. You don't have to wait. You're not a victim. You're not passive. That when you get more structure in your day, certain activities that you have scheduled, productive things that you have planned, you are in motion, you are in the arena, and you are creating energy and activity and momentum from the inside out, rather than sitting back like a passive victim talking about how slow it is, how nothing's going on, how tough a month it's going to be, and you take control of your own destiny with structure. And I'm a big believer in what it says here in letter A. Take a look, please. Letter A, human beings develop to their potential in structured environments. I tell you, one of the biggest things that stops people from hitting their potential in sales is the passive approach to selling that I just described, waiting for something to happen, waiting for the manager to come and say, hey, what have you got going? I'm waiting for the manager to come along and hug and burp you or wind you up every day. That kills your potential in sales. And if you want to develop to your potential, as it says here, you're going to need structure. Human beings develop to their potential in structured environments. It doesn't matter if you're a great athlete, if you're a great musician, if you're trying to learn foreign languages, if you're trying to get a black belt in the martial arts, all right, you're not going to accomplish those things by making it up as you go along, by being a mile wide and an inch deep every day. You're going to have structure. You're going to have, you would have to have certain activities to do, certain accountability for those activities, practicing, drilling, rehearsing, repetition, developing the skills, developing the rhythm, building the consistency. So here's my question. How much structure do you have in your day? Again, if we were running that game film, what would we see? Would we see you making it up as you go along? Would we see you taking this passive approach to sales where you're waiting for something to happen and not doing much with your downtime? Or would we see you coming in focus with the plan for the day already made because you did it the night before, and you've got a product that you're practicing, you've got an inventory walk that you're doing, you've got X number of calls that you're going to make, you've got a script that you're going to role play with your role play partner to keep warmed up and fresh, so when a customer does come in, you're not coming off the bench cold, but you're ready to go, you're reflexive, you got your game face on. I mean, which category would you fall into? And if you look here what it says under letter A, this is a mindset, and it's so valuable if you'll embrace it. Lose the notion that there are throwaway days in sales. Now, we would never say it out loud that, Tuesday's a throwaway day, or the 4th of the month is a throwaway day, or, we didn't sell much, but it's just a Monday, it's just a Wednesday, it's just the 8th. We wouldn't say those words, this is a throwaway day, but we say things that indicate that. And the way we behave on an average day indicates the belief that this day we really don't expect much from it anyway. It kind of is a throwaway day. It really doesn't matter. Let me tell you what, there are a lot more potentially average days in a month than there are exceptional ones. And so if you've got that idea that some days aren't as important, that they don't matter, that you don't have to try as hard, you are missing your potential by a mile. It says focus on making each day a masterpiece. You've heard me say that before. I learned that from Coach John Wooden. He learned it from his father. Make each day a masterpiece. What can you do to make Monday a masterpiece? The 3rd, the 1st, the 2nd, the 8th. These days that sometimes we take for granted. Sometimes we're in neutral. Sometimes we go through the motions. And then at the end of the month we look back. Maybe we missed the bonus by 1. Maybe we missed the next level. Maybe we missed number 1 on the board by 1. And I guarantee you, it wasn't the busy days that you missed it. You go back and you look, it was something that you did during those, quote, slow days, throwaway days, however you classify them, that cost you that ranking, that cost you that bonus, that cost you that money, that cost you that goal that you had. There are no throwaway days. We can make each day a masterpiece if you'll put more structure in them. All right? We do develop to our potential in structured environments. So here's some how-tos to create more structure. Let's move over now to number 4. Number 4 is so basic as far as a time management discipline, but I see people at all levels. I see the owners of places, all the way down to the most basic frontline employee, team member of a place, failing to do this. Always schedule your priorities. I know you've probably heard people say, well, you need to prioritize your schedule. I'm telling you, that's not as important as scheduling your priorities. Because what good does it do you to prioritize your schedule if you are prioritizing low return things? Things that aren't going to give you the greatest return for your investment of time. It says here, the question isn't, will your calendar be full? My guess it's going to be full. But what will fill your calendar? That's really the question. You know, and so often we confuse activity with accomplishment. And I heard a story, and I'm sure you all have heard it, but it probably bears repeating here. I heard this many, many years ago as a new salesperson. And it was by Dr. Stephen Covey, the late Stephen Covey, and he was talking about the big rocks. And I had read one of his books, and I had a notion of the story there, but when I heard him tell it, it just made even more sense. And maybe you're familiar with the big rock story, but let me just share with you the principles, and I think it'll make a lot of sense. Covey talks about a college professor who, in front of his classroom, he had this huge glass jar. And he put these large rocks in the jar, as many as he could fit. And he asked the class, now, class, I want to fill this big jar up the rest of the way. I've got these big rocks in it. What else could fill up some space? So somebody raises his hand and says, well, you could put gravel or some type of stones in there. And Covey mentioned that, of course, the professor had anticipated this, and he had some buckets of gravel, and he picked them up, and he poured them all, as much of the stones as he could in there, and filled up as much space as possible. And it looked really full. He said, is there anything else I could pour in here to fill up this empty space? And somebody else raised their hand and said, yeah, you could put sand in there. Sand would fill in some of that empty space. He said, absolutely right. So he anticipated that. He took out the sand. He put as much sand in as he could and filled it up to all the way to the brim. And he said, is there anything else I could put in here? And someone raised their hand and said, well, you could put water in there, and water would seep through and fill out the remaining space. So he took out the water and he filled it up, and he said, is there anything else? And everybody agreed that that was as full as that jar was going to get. He said, so what's the lesson? And people were saying crazy things like, it's amazing how many things you could get done if you do them one at a time, or these things that sounded good but really weren't the answer the professor was looking for. Here's what he said. He said, here's what the answer is. He said that the lesson I want you to get out of this, and the lesson I want you to get, and that I want to remind many of you of, you already know this, many of you, but I want to remind you of it. Of all the things you could put in the jar, if you don't put the big rocks in first, you're not going to get them in at all. And that's the lesson. The big rocks are your priorities. And that jar is your calendar. And if you don't put the big rocks in first, if you don't schedule those in and get them in first, you're not going to get them in at all. If the gravel gets in there and the sand fills it up and the water and all these lesser things that aren't as meaningful, that aren't as high return, if they get in there first, you're not going to be able to get the big rocks in at all, make a big mess, even trying to make it happen. And so your priorities, metaphorically here, are the big rocks. And you've got to schedule those things. And what most people do is they don't schedule their priorities. Instead, they take them and they try to cram them into the day. Let me try to see if I can fit it in here, squeeze it in there. And what this whole analogy is about is you schedule the priority and you work the day around it. Now, things may happen that get you off track, but at least if you have it scheduled to begin with, you're more likely to get back to it. And so take a look here at what it says with letter A. Letter A, speaking of priorities, identify them, schedule them, and if you get off track, get back to them as soon as you can. Now, this is a daily discipline. A daily discipline. And I don't know what your priorities are. I mean, this is something you have to figure out. You have different responsibilities. I mean, if you're brand new in sales, my guess is one of your priorities is going to be, learning the product. And if you've been at it a while and you've been there 10, 15, 20 years, you're probably going to have a different priority. It's not so much learning the product as it is nurturing your customer base and making calls and staying in touch with people and asking for referrals. And so our priorities vary. And they will change from time to time, but my goodness, you have to know what they are, otherwise you don't have a prayer of getting them done. But when you figure out what they are, based on where you are, schedule them and make sure they get done first. or they're not likely to get done at all. So number 4, always schedule your priorities. It'll make that Tuesday mean more, that Wednesday mean more, that 3rd, 5th, 8th, 11th, 15th of the month mean more if you're going in with purpose. If you've got the important things scheduled, you're not going to be as passive. It's going to be easier to know what to say yes to that day, what to say no to, what to engage in, what to withdraw from. You're going to be far more effective. It's going to be a much more powerful daily routine. Let's move on to point 5. Point 5, high impact daily routine activities include, and I'm going to give you a sampling. So the blank there is activities. I'm going to give you a handful of sample daily activities. Now, these are basic, but I find that just because they're basic doesn't mean we know to do them or we're doing them as consistently as we like. Some of you are probably, hopefully, doing some of these really well, but I don't know that any of you are going to be 100% where you want to be in all 5, 6, or 7 of these areas here. So let's just take a look in the mirror again. If somebody were running the game film that we just did yesterday, let's say they shot the film of us yesterday, all right? And they were looking for these things. Out of that daily routine yesterday, how many of them would they find? Let's take a look. Letter A. Phone blitzes. I like phone blitzes. A phone blitz. Okay, we have structured purpose for phone blitzes. We are setting appointments. We're following up, working customers. We're soliciting referrals. We're trying to revive these deals that have gone cold. And before we go home the night before, we outline here are the people I'm going to call. And we already have it set up, so you're not going in there that next day trying to figure it out and looking for your notes. You're going in with purpose. You're not starting the day in neutral. You're hitting the ground running. But I love phone blitzes. Phone blitzes put you in motion. And they get you into a position where you're creating that structure, you're creating that activity, you've got the structure, and you're creating energy from the inside out. It says get in motion, and you're more likely to stay in motion. Real simple. Be at rest, and that's how you're likely to remain. You've all heard that law of physics. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion. Objects at rest tend to stay at rest. I believe you could substitute objects for salespeople there. Put salespeople in the place of objects. Salespeople in motion tend to stay in motion. Salespeople at rest tend to stay at rest. Well, what I like about phone blitz is they get you doing something. All right? And you've got it structured, and you're talking, and you're staying warm, and you're making something happen. Now, maybe some of you have an expectation from your leadership team that you've got to make X number of calls a day. So you say, okay, we're doing this, we're doing this. Okay, but are you doing it with purpose? Do you have those calls set up, again, the night before? I mean, you spend a few minutes setting up tomorrow before you leave home today, you're going to have a far better daily routine. And if you are required to make 10 calls a day, when you get to 10, if you're on a roll, you got nothing else to do at the moment, keep going. I mean, don't be one of those people who does just enough to get by, right? Who does the bare minimum and then stops. I mean, if 10 is the requirement, then just keep this in mind. That's baseline. That's not heroic. All you're doing is what you're supposed to do. You don't get the big time in anything by just doing what you're supposed to do. Keep going. You know, get to 12, get to 15. Could you do 20 good quality calls? I mean, why would you stop at 10? You got nothing else to do. Go grab the paper, eat another donut, and wait for something to happen. I mean, if you're in motion, stay in motion. So phone blitzes will certainly help you. Let's talk about another activity, letter B. Letter B, product presentation practice. Now, those of you who have watched these DVDs for a while, you know I'm a big believer in practice. I did a whole presentation on practice. And you also know that I like the idea of weekly product training themes. I like weekly themes. And I used to have weekly themes when I was running a group of car dealerships. We would have a product of the week. We would have a closing technique of the week, an objection of the week, weekly themes that the team would be working on in between our formal training sessions to stay sharp, internalize their skills, build their confidence, and so forth. And so often, though, you see salespeople, they don't want to practice. It's like they think they've arrived. You know, and the problem is you've got downtime. You can practice in that downtime. Downtime that is structured properly keeps you sharp. It keeps you focused. It keeps you in motion. If you never practice, you're just practicing on your customers. I promise you, if you'll practice in between customers rather than on your customers, you're going to do a lot better when you're with your customers. Okay? So often we're in front of a customer and it's amateur hour. We're coming off the bench cold. We haven't practiced anything. We're not in motion. We don't even have a high level of confidence yet that day. And we don't nearly make the connection or the impact that we could. It says preparation builds confidence and reduces stress. So however you want to set this up, maybe you choose a product of the week. Maybe your management team is assigning it, but maybe they're not. So don't wait for them to do it. You do it. You're a professional. You do it. This week, I'm really going to focus on this product or maybe these two products. And I'm going to get a role play partner. I'm going to get someone else on the team who's serious about making big money. Okay, who to them, this is not just a job, just like to me, this is not just a job. This is something that we really see great potential in. I'm going to get someone who's serious and we're going to work on this together. And I don't care what anybody else thinks about it. This is me. This is my income, my family, my career, my future. I'm taking it seriously. Don't care if anybody else on the team practices. I'm going to. Okay. And I'm going to be out there and you know, I'm going to set the tone and set the example. So if you'll take that type of mindset, I promise you, every day has more purpose. You're going to be far more polished and effective when you're in front of that customer. So you look at the first two, if they filmed these yesterday, if they did that game film I'm talking about, that training film of you, were you on a phone blitz? Did you have structure? Did you have them set up in advance? Did you stop at the bare minimum of calls or did you keep going? Did you do a practice presentation? You know, what'd you learn about your product? What did you do to develop that skill yesterday? How would you be doing? We've gone over 2. Hopefully you're 2 for 2. If not, then there's room to improve. Let's talk about the third one, letter C. The third activity I want to talk about that helps create a far more powerful daily routine is prospecting. You know, and when I say prospecting, you don't always have to prospect every day to be a successful prospector, but sometime during the week, you know, you need to have some prospecting calls or stops made up here. It says, dig your well before you're thirsty. I love that quote, and actually that's the name of a book that Harvey Mackay did, and it's all about prospecting. And the reason he said dig your well before you're thirsty is most salespeople wait until they're thirsty before they start prospecting. They wait until they're hungry. They wait until the bad month, the lull, the slump. Oh, I better get out there and prospect. What he's saying is build the pipeline before you need it. And that way the pipeline is always running for you. It's always working for you. There are always people in the pipeline. And you know, prospecting consistently is the key. You know, and again, if you just did it a couple of times a week, just letting more people know who you are, what you do, where you work, you know, getting their information, putting it in your master list, and then communicating with them on a consistent basis and continuing to build that master list and meeting more people and getting more referrals and putting them in there and sending out that newsletter every so often, doing those follow-up calls every so often. You can make that part of your daily routine where now you're prospecting with purpose, right? You're not just waiting for something to happen. You're building your pipeline. You're digging your well before you're thirsty. And while other people sometimes are sitting around waiting for something to happen, having those slow days, you've got stuff working because you've been working. It's a great part of your daily routine. Let's talk about another one. And I've already mentioned this one a couple times. Let's make it official. Letter D. Planning tomorrow and scheduling its priorities. Before you go home tonight, plan tomorrow. Whatever type of planner you use, whether it's a physical planner, an electronic planner, it doesn't matter. But whatever type of planner that you use, whatever type of planner you're comfortable with, spend 5 minutes, probably is all it would take, 10 at the most, and you're scheduling your priorities. You know, here are the calls, here are the phone blitz I'm going to get on, you know, it's sometime during tomorrow. Here are the people I'm going to call, I've already got them. And then here's the product I'm going to work on over here. Here are these other things I'm going to do. You know, here's my inventory walk. I'm going to schedule that for early in the morning, so I'm out there and I'm in the arena and I'm making something happen. And here's the script I'm going to role play. Or you get the idea. Whatever. Here are the prospecting stops I'm going to make. I'm going to leave a little bit earlier, and I'm going to hit a couple places, you know, on the way to work, and just, you know, places maybe I normally shop, places I already spend money, and I'm just going to make them aware of who I am, where I work, and what I do, kind of get their information, put them on my list, you know, just kind of get something going even before you're at work. That was the way I loved to prospect when I was selling. I would just stop at a couple places that I was already doing business with and just get their information and make them more aware of who I was and what I was doing. That adds up over time. That adds up. And so you're planning tomorrow. And then the quote from Jim Rohn, finish your day before you start it. That's what I'm talking about here. You're actually finishing tomorrow before you start it because you're planning it tonight. So now when you walk in tomorrow, you've got a blueprint, You're not having to start the day from scratch wondering, okay, what do I do first? Lulling around. I see people, they take 30, 45 minutes, an hour to get warmed up in the morning. They blow an hour, that golden hour, that first hour of the day. Some of them, it takes longer than that. Just trying to find their groove, trying to get into motion. They've got no purpose. They've got no focus. They waste dozens of hours a month that way. And they wonder why they're not hitting the big time in sales. Let's talk about a few more. Letter E, I've already mentioned this one. Let's get to it. Letter E, an inventory walk. Now, depending on what you sell, this may not be relevant, but for a lot of you watching this that sell trucks and cars, boats and RVs, you got to get out there and walk the inventory and be aware of what the heck is going on. What just came in, what's not here anymore. I mean, knowledge is power. Look what it says here. Knowledge of your inventory arms you for consistently more sales. Knowledge is power here. And what I like about going out and doing your inventory walk, you're warming up. And you're putting yourself in the arena. Boy, the inventory walk was one of the first disciplines I would hit every morning. I like to get out there. I like to grab that first customer. And I usually would get them because I was already out there. I wasn't in there eating. Listen, I ate before I got to work, okay? Because when I got to work, I wanted to work. I was there to make a living. I was there to put money in the bank, not to put pounds around my middle. All right, and so you go to work with your game face on. So while they were all in there doing their thing, I was out doing the inventory walk, getting warmed up, familiarizing myself, and inevitably I would run into customers. And there's nothing like getting that first customer or two of the day and selling them. And by noon, you've got a couple sales made. Everybody else, they're just starting to get into motion. They're wondering what they're having for lunch. You're so focused and busy, you don't even notice that you miss lunch. We've had those days. Those are great days. It says knowledge of your inventory, again, arms you. Now, here's the key word, for consistently, just underline that, consistently more sales. Okay? Because it's going to add another sale or two or three a month if you do this consistently, just because you're more aware of what's going on. Let's talk about letter F. Letter F, role play. Role play. Oh, some of you just cringed and you flinched. I have to role play during my daily routine. Yeah, role play objections, closing, asking for referrals, anchoring appointments, phone scripts, whatever scripts that you're working on. Role play these things. It says, in between customers, sales professionals convert downtime into prime time. What I like about role playing is, as I said earlier, it builds confidence, it reduces stress, it warms you up. You're not coming off the bench cold when you see the customer get out there. And you can watch films on closing, and that's helpful. DVDs, online training, that's all helpful. You can read about closing and objections in books, that's helpful. You can hear me or your manager talk about those things, and that's helpful. But until you're saying the words, until you're saying it, in real life situations, you never quite get it like you should. You don't have the confidence, the timing, the rhythm. It doesn't sound natural or conversational. And that's what I love about role playing. Once you really get good at saying certain techniques, it doesn't sound like a script. It sounds conversational. It sounds natural. The customer is still at ease. You don't sound like you're getting all hyped up to put a, quote, pitch on them. And what takes a script and turns it into conversation? Practice, role playing. Really encourage you. Schedule some of these. Have a closing technique of the week, an objection of the week, a phone script of the week that you're working on. You see the structure you can put in here? I mentioned earlier, as human beings, we develop to our potential in structured environments. Look at the structure you can start putting in your daily routine. Phone blitzes, practice product presentations, prospecting, planning. Planning is a discipline. Your inventory walk, role playing. This is not rocket science, but these are basic sales disciplines that will always consistently lead you to success if you execute them consistently and with excellence. Now let's take a look at letter G. Letter G covers everything else. Letter G, anything that helps you make a sale today or at some point in the future. Put that in your daily routine. That is one of our challenges as sales professionals. We have to work it from both ends. When I go to, I want to make a sale today. Absolutely. I'm not there to be a spectator. I'm there to make a sale today, but at the same time, I want to plant seeds for future sales. I want to continue to build the pipeline. And so anything else that you can do that helps you make a sale today or creates a future sale, you want to put that in your daily routine. It just is working both aspects of sales. Prevents your pipeline from drying up. And so, by the way, it's not in your notes, but something else. If you want to have a masterpiece daily routine, for some of you, it's going to start before you even get to work. It's going to start in the car with what you're listening to on the way to work. That starts your daily routine. Okay, are you listening to garbage, just amusing stuff, negative stuff, just loud stuff, or are you listening to something that's really getting you focused on making a sale today, something motivational, inspirational, educational? Or for some of you, maybe it even starts before you get in the car to leave. It starts when you're still at home. Maybe you have some reading time, exercise, something you do just to get yourself ready for a masterpiece day. So while I primarily covered things that we would do while we're at work, we all know successful people that have dynamite routines, there's normally things they're doing before they even leave the house and on the way to work that get them ready for a masterpiece performance. Now, let's continue with our work here. How'd that game film turn out, by the way, that training film that we were filming of you, out of those letters A through G? How did you do? How many of those things, if somebody filmed you yesterday, would they be able to check off the list? Yep, I saw her do this, I saw him do that. And you know the answer to that. And I hope some of you, that you scored really high. But even if you're somewhere in the middle or somewhere low, that should encourage you, because you're probably still doing fairly well. And if you're doing fairly well without putting these things into your daily routine, how much better could it get if you started doing these things and tightening up that daily routine? So let's pick 3. Look what it says. List the 3 aspects that will have the most positive impact on your daily routine. You can add more than 3. I think 3 is manageable. And maybe there's some things on here you kind of do, but you don't do consistently enough. Put it on there. Maybe there's some you don't do at all. Put it on there. And when can you start this? Well, how much time is there left today? Why not start by making today a better routine, making today more meaningful, making whatever is left of today a masterpiece? And then while you're at it, start to structure tomorrow to create that masterpiece daily routine for it as well. Remember, there are no throwaway days, and the secret to your success lies in your daily routine. Let's create some $1 million daily routines out there. Get to work. I'll talk to you on the next DVD.